Hi everyone, and welcome to this special edition of Low Season Traveller Insider Guides. I'm your host, Jed Brown, founder of Low Season Traveller, and this episode is taken from the 9th session of the Keeping the Dream Alive series of webinars, which we're collaborating on with the World Tourism Association for Culture and Heritage and My Travel Research. This episode is entitled So What's Your Go-To Market Strategy? And has been really well received given the number of questions we've had from our audience this week. Luke Donkin is a commercial director at Tourist Tracker and has more than 17 years professional experience working with search engine marketing, data and technology companies. Passionate about the industry, Luke values insight, creativity and technology in equal measure, ensuring an innovative approach to developing data and technology-led strategic solutions. Luke's presentation explored the challenges of travel marketing during the COVID-19 recovery phase and how data and technology can help brands to create seamless customer experiences across all media channels and devices. Luke's session will focus particularly on personalisation within the booking process and how to follow that up with a traveller experience while consuming the end product. Enjoy.
Well, thanks very much, everyone, for having me along. It's really fantastic to be invited along to speak at one of these webinars. Obviously, we're all going through a tough time right now, and especially over the last couple of months, whereby we've seen, because of reasons outside of our control, tourism numbers, our businesses completely go into hibernation. Having been in this position for a couple of months, we're now starting to see the green shoots come out the other side. And when I was starting to research, I guess what information was out there and available for this presentation, one of the reports I came across was the Reboot Australia report. Now, it is specific to Australia, but I think there are some learnings that can be taken away from there for any region or any business as we come out of the COVID hibernation. And one of the interesting points I saw in that was the suggestion that businesses, or in our case, destinations, that really embrace digital technologies and cloud-based technologies are going to do significantly better in terms of scaling, in terms of customer acquisition as we move forward out of this phase. The reason why this piqued my interest is because at the end of the day, to really align with digital transformation, digital customer acquisition, or even utilize cloud-based technologies for personalization, we really need data to sort of fuel that, because it is the thing that suggests the better the data is that goes in, the better the outcome or output there's going to be, and therefore the better you're going to be able to acquire customers and get back on track. So to give you a bit about background about myself, I've been in the digital sector, I guess, for the past 18 or so years, specifically within technology and data for the last 10 years. And over the last 3 or so years, I've been working with numerous different travel and tourism clients, specifically focusing on travel data. But today, and just making sure you can, there we go. Today, I'm going to speak to you primarily around why most consumer data advice does not work for the travel and tourism industry. And the reason why I think this is so important is because at the end of the day, everybody who's worked in this sector is going to be affected by COVID. So it's not just operators, it's not just accommodation providers, it's not just airlines, etc. It's going to be the likes of data vendors. And every data vendor or advertising vendor or agency or platform that comes to you and says, I can help you get the business, your business up and running, and I can get the most profitable return for you in the short term, is going to suggest that they have the best data set out there for you. So what you really need to be able to do when you walk away from this presentation today, and I promise you, it's not going to be in-depth, heavy, numerical focus or anything like that, but what we want to do is give you 3 or 4 things to walk away with to give you confidence, no matter where your understanding is of data acquisition right now, to be able to ask these vendors to qualify whether or not the data set they are utilizing or they are selling is appropriate for your business or your product or your destination. But to sort of give you an idea as to why I've come to this position, I think we should start with looking at the sort of the data I've found best that has worked for me in the past. And the first thing I want you to take away from this presentation is this term, deterministic. Deterministic is a label we give to a specific type of data. Deterministic, as the name suggests, indicates that something can be determined from that data set. So for instance, if I went to the Qantas website and I searched for a flight from Sydney to Melbourne, you could determine that I was in market to travel to Melbourne. If you could take out a data touch point there that suggested that I was traveling on the 14th of July, you again would be able to determine that I was traveling on that date. So you can start to see deterministic data is a factual data set. On the flip side, there's a data set or a label we give to a data set called probabilistic. And as the name suggests again, it means that something is probably happening. It means we've inferred or drawn a line between two touch points, and that's the way in which we've classified what this consumer or what this user is doing. So to give you an example of that, probabilistic data could include if I go to a website about Melbourne nightlife, Melbourne restaurants, or something like that. You could infer that I was interested in, going out in Melbourne, eating out in Melbourne, and then some vendors will actually say, well, because Luke has gone and researched this content and it's contextually relevant to someone who might travel to that destination, that he is therefore in market. The reality is that might be the case now, it might be the case in 6 months' time. There's no real knowing on when that's going to happen or if it will ever happen at all. So it's a probabilistic data set. That's why I only use, when my marketing, deterministic data sets. And to give you an idea of what they are and the touch points that I utilize frequent flyer loyalty program touch points. I utilize device ID touch points. Now, a device ID is connected to your mobile phone. It allows us to track dispersal when someone flies into a region. So it's really great for destinations in that regards. I'll give you an example. If you're the tourism body across a state and you've got one main entry point via air, and if we took South Australia, for instance, Adelaide is the major entry point if you're coming in by commercial aircraft. But what you need to do as an organization is actually move people around the state as well. Being able to measure these people moving around the state by the fact that we can track device IDs enables us to really have an idea of what impact our marketing and media activity is having. It's not just getting someone to book, it's not just getting them to the entry point, it's really being able to ingest that information and make analysis of it so that therefore we can optimize our go-to-market strategy to get the best possible return moving forward. Another type of deterministic data would be credit card analysis or financial investment analysis. So what I do is I bring in these three types of data sets and layer them over the top. And what I can do is I can segment up the audience based on what I can learn from their declared information, which is deterministic within the frequent flyer program. I can understand when they're traveling because I can match that back to the behavioral information they'll do within the Qantas own assets or the airline's own assets. I can then follow them around when they get into the actual regional destination, and I can allocate the spend that they're doing within that particular region with the credit card analysis at a deterministic level to have a true idea of what the impact my marketing and media strategy has been delivering. So things to keep in mind, deterministic data is great. Deterministic data is GDPR compliant as long as it's not personally identifying and it meets all those rules. So that process we went through in the last sort of 6 to 12 months in making sure that we are aligned to and compliant with the GDPR recommendations or legislation that came out of Europe is absolutely critical, but this data set will allow you to do that. And therefore, it gives you a true picture of what's happening and the ability to optimize as you need to moving forward. So that's why I believe we should utilize those data sets. But to visualize that for you and to give you a real world example of who might be able to use this, let's use a commercial partner at this time. Say it's an airline. If this was an airline and this is Kate who's the traveler, Kate's traveling, she's got a ticket from Brisbane to Adelaide, and all we really know about her from the airline perspective who sold this ticket to her is that she's traveling in economy. They'll know the dates she's traveling and they will know the fare class she's on. But what if the airline had known more about Kate before she was actually converted and purchased that particular product? Perhaps they might know, that she's a frequent business traveler, that she stays at business class hotels, that she rents luxury vehicles. We might also know that she's got 3 kids, she's an international traveler and takes them to Pacific every year, and that she searches on online travel agencies. So she does have some brand or a loyalty, but cost is still a big thing to her. If this airline had known more about Kate before they put a creative in front of her or before they put an ad in front of her in order to be able to convert her, they may have been able to build a better emotional connection with Kate, converted her at a higher yield, and therefore also be able to drive that loyalty to make them the preferred brand moving forward. It could be as simple as understanding that she's a business traveler and needs a flexible ticket rather than a sale ticket. It might be that she travels to the Pacific every year with her kids. So how do we make sure that the creative that we're delivering to Kate around the time that she usually takes her annual holiday is targeted towards not just her, but her and her family and a family-based offer? These are the things that we can really start to build out if we have the right data set to become more personalized in our customer acquisition, but also be more personalized when it comes to actually consuming that particular product. And I'll go into that a bit more as we go along. But if you think this sounds very advanced, if you think this sounds quite sophisticated, and if you think you're behind the curve in actually putting this into implementation and making sure you're getting the most from your marketing and media dollars, I think we need to have a look back at the past and see what we were doing pre-COVID. Because I have to say, no one out there at scale is doing this consistently at the perfect level. And the reason for that is when we start to look at creative like this. These are 4 destinations that have very, very similar creative. Now, this creative looks great and appealing, but there's nothing personalized about it. There's nothing that says to Luke, well, one of these stands out because we know what you're after before you've asked for it, and we can deliver on that. Or we can deliver on the experience that you're into because we know more about you. And it doesn't have to be creepy in the way we do it, but it just has to build that emotional connection with the consumer, because when you build that emotional connection with the consumer, they're far more likely to convert in a shorter possible time and do so at a higher investment. And at the end of the day, when we come out of the COVID-19 hibernation, we're going to need every marketing dollar we've got to work as hard as it possibly can for us, because budgets are going to be finite, and therefore we really need to be able to show that return on advertiser spend. But it's not just destinations, it's our commercial partners as well. These are 4 hotel rooms and actually 4 creative that I have been served previously. Now, I've taken the logos off them so it's not showing who each individual brand is, but these could be anywhere in Australia or the world for that matter. They could be in any city. And when I look at these, there's no real differentiator between them. They all serve the purpose I need for right now, which you'd expect, which is a bed for the night, but there's nothing additional that draws me to one particular brand or another. And when we start to look at that, we start to really purchase on price. And when we purchase on price, it's a bit of a race to the bottom. It's not great if you win and it's terrible if you lose. So how do we build that emotional connection by knowing more about our consumer to not only personalize targeting them, the acquisition of that particular consumer, but also then giving a really personalized experience based on what we know of them. And I'll give you an example of that and how a hotel chain has done that for me. My partner and I like to go to Bali about once a year, just a long weekend. It's a very easy trip here from Sydney. But one of the things that's always annoyed me about traveling in general is not being able to check in or check out of my hotel room with ease whenever I want to. So when you go to Bali from Sydney, you fly in, you arrive at the night. If you fly in the after work flight, it's check in straight away, no dramas there. It comes at the other end of the holiday. It comes at the time when you have to check out around midday, 1 o'clock, when your flight might not be to 10 p.m. that evening. I used to get annoyed that I have to buy an additional day or hope like hell I could get a late checkout. But that was until one hotel group targeted me, having bought a deterministic data set for which I was part of. They knew that I was landing in the evening, but they also knew that I was flying back on a red-eye flight. They then were able to serve me up creative that enabled me to have a 24-hour check-in, check-out policy. Now, what that meant is that when I checked in, the clock started running on the day that I had purchased. So on the day we were leaving, I didn't have to check out until 8 p.m. in the evening, and our flight was at 10:30. It worked absolutely perfectly for me. That was something that I needed that I hadn't told the brand I needed yet, and they'd been able to personalize that creative for me. I purchased that immediately. Sure, the hotel chain had put a premium on buying that, but that didn't worry me at all, because at the end of the day, all I wanted to do was be able to facilitate the want and need I have to make sure I had a greater experience of not just the accommodations, but the entire holiday itself. And therefore, it meant that I go back to Bali every time, and I continually purchase at that particular hotel. Now, you might be thinking, how does this work with occupancy? If Luke's checking out late one day, does this put risk at having that hotel have an empty room night? And the reality is it doesn't. Because this deterministic data set continually refreshes on a daily basis, that hotel chain was able to then target someone coming in on the same flight that I did just on the day I was leaving. So in essence, they were able to increase their yield on that particular room for the stay that I was there and for the stay that the next person was in there, through doing nothing else but being more strategic with their personalization strategy by utilizing the right data set to be able to get the right customer who was prepared to pay more, and therefore pay more often as they do so moving forward. But it's not just hotels, it's the airline industry as well. We don't have anything more than a lot of generic creative out there at the moment. And if we're going to win coming out of the COVID-19 hibernation shutdown, we really need to engage in that emotional connection with the consumer by using the right data set. So what would you do? How do you do this? Who do you ask? What are the questions that you need to be able to make sure that you've got the right data set? And there are 3 key points here that I want you to take away from this particular presentation if you take nothing else away. The first one is transparency. You need to know where the data comes from to determine whether or not it's going to be the right data for you. And let me give you some examples of that. If someone comes to you and you're a hotel chain and they say, oh, we've got the data you absolutely need, and this is going to help you scale, what you should be asking is, where did you get that data from? If you're a hotel chain, the best data out there would most likely be airline data, because it enables you to see when people are arriving in your particular destination. For that transparency piece, you also need to know additional data points like length of stay, date arrival, date departure, class of travel, because all of these things enable you to therefore segment up and really stringently hone in on the type of creative you're going to put forward to a particular individual to make sure that they understand the type of offering you have, and also make sure you get the product in front of them that's going to yield the highest possible for them. So transparency is the first thing you need to ask from your data providers. Secondly, you need to understand whether or not you can verify this data. And what I mean by verification is, how do we determine that this data set is actually in market right now? It's no good if someone comes along to you and says, I've got a fantastic pool, or we've got great audience for you that we can target for your destination, if those people have already traveled to it and left in the last month. We need to be able to make sure that it's in the future. We need to be able to understand what the search to book and the advanced purchase windows are going to be on these particular people, so that therefore we can give you the best possible opportunity to convert that individual at the highest possible rate. And the third thing I want you to take away from this is that the data has to be activated in real time. There's no point if you've got transparency and understand that this data set is the data set you want to take away and it's made up of the data points that you absolutely need. It's no point that if it's the right data and it's in the future and you understand when that person is due to travel to your region, if we can't get an ad in front of it at the right time to make sure that they've got the best possible opportunity to convert. You can't sell a hotel room tonight by putting an ad in front of someone in 3 days' time. There's no point if you're looking to drive a visitation to a particular destination in the next month by having them arrive or have the ability to travel 3 months' time from now. What you need to understand is that you can get the right message in front of the right user at the right time to personalize the offer, engage with them at an emotional level, and therefore have them buy into what you're actually selling. So there are the 3 things: transparency, number 1, verification, and activation in real time. If you ask those 3 questions, you'll be able to determine that the data set you have is going to be the data set that you want to use moving forward. So the key takeaway from this is simply that not all data is created equal. You do have your probabilistic data. That's not going to work well if you're looking to sell stuff and sell it now. You've got to make sure that it's transparent, you've got to make sure that it's verified, and you've got to make sure that you can activate it in real time. Of course, on top of this, it's interesting to take note that the data set that you need is not the data set that your competitors are going to need. It's not the data set that destinations in your region are going to need if you're selling a commercial product. It's going to be different based on the products that you have, based on the price point that you're at, and based on the target audience that you're looking to engage with. So the takeaway from here: transparency, verification, activation in real time. Deterministic data is the best data set you're going to have. Not all data is created equal. And just to bear in mind that cheap data is not going to be great data. Really good data is going to perform 5, 6, 10 times better than just a regular probabilistic model. So to make sure that you are getting the data set you need, it's going to have a price associated with it that is representative of that. But it will return a much higher return on advertiser spend.
So there you have it. Huge thanks again to Luke Donkin for sharing his insights with us this week. And if you haven't already done so, please do listen to the Q&A from this session, which follows in the next episode, also out now. That's all for now. Enjoy your day, stay safe, stay healthy, stay home, and don't forget that our content will always be free for everyone, as we believe that travel is better without the crowds.